just moving forward a little bit? How can I shortcut your process to getting to that next stage to learn from my lessons, but yet go through the lessons that you need to go through so you can succeed?
Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. On this episode, we welcome in Glenn Leifhiet, who, as the Senior Security Program Manager with Microsoft, he understands what it means to be at the center of high-growth environments, but also emphasizes the importance to ready ourselves for everything that comes with growth by prioritizing how we invest in ourselves. Hello, folks. Welcome back in for the most recent installment of GrowthReady. I'm so excited to be welcoming someone that I've had the pleasure of getting to know now for a couple of years. And this is a long overdue recorded conversation. We've had many non-recorded conversations, but Glenn, I'm excited to have you in today, brother. But before we start learning more about your story, please go ahead and answer the question I ask everybody now. What does it mean to you to be growth ready?
That's actually a really big question in my mind, and in so many ways. I think the thing that I think about growth ready and being in that state is the fact that so many of us, if you look at life in general, it's about just getting by or just moving forward a little bit. And I feel like with growth ready and growth ready to me really means honestly really being ready with growth, right? And ready for that growth and leaning into that growth and not being afraid to learn from any situation you're in. Like, I've got stories which we'll probably talk about here where it's like, the reason I grew is because, oops, that happened. Oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen, but boy, did I grow through that. And being ready and willing to take that chance, take that stretch, and really be ready to propel yourself through the ups and the downs of life.
I love that. I love that. And there's a responsiveness, there's a willingness component to what you're saying here. And I think when you're as close to growth as you are, and we're going to learn more about your story and what you have going on today and have had going on for many years as we go through this. But when you're as close to growth as you are, and you almost get to know it so intimately, I happen to believe, because people ask me all the time, like, here you are, Steve, walking around town asking everyone else what it means to to them to be growth ready. What does it mean to you to be growth ready? And my response is probably different every time I answer the question. And some will push back and say, well, that's not good. And the fact of the matter is, growth is this thing that if you do immerse yourself in it enough, it's actually really hard to articulate it because you're so in it. You're so ingrained in it. And I heard that in your response because you have been so immersed in it. But there were a couple of
journey. It's that journey that's inside, and nobody else can see the journey that you're having. I think that's one of the real downfalls in some ways, because it's really hard to share that. Right, the person next to you is like, "What the heck's happening to you?" And I'm growing. What do you mean you're growing? You're not getting taller. They're used to that type of growth, not the internal brain growth that we're going through.
Right. I'd love to actually start there because I think this is a great opportunity to immediately highlight two bodies of work that you're working on today, which is that of your own podcast, From Stuck to Growth. There you are. You've got your own podcast with the word growth in too. And then also you do this co-hosting event on LinkedIn every week, Mentorship Live, which I think about both of those things. They're very internally focused. It's about the human being. It's about the person coming to that environment that you're providing. Talk to me about when and how this internal desire came from you to be so aware of that need to internally always be growing in some capacity.
I think in some ways I've always had a certain level of it. I was, in my, we'll say, not quite so many years ago, maybe many years ago, when I was in high school, I would, I'd read the Tony Robbins books when they first came out. I was really into that space and really interested in it, but I never really did anything with it. I had the knowledge, but I just didn't know how to implement it. I wasn't in that space yet. My brain wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for the surroundings and pushback that I got from everyone else when it came to that. But I think I fast forward a number of years later. I was actually working at a company, and just hopefully a fairly quick story here. I actually I got so the short story is my ex-boss who worked at that company, who was an executive, called me and said, "Don't interview or don't if you get severance, don't spend it." I'm like, what? That's a weird statement. Then would you be willing to work with me? Yeah, of course. I liked working with you. And then I didn't hear anything for a couple of months. Then I hear another rumbling from him that's like, well, get your resume ready. I'm like, okay. And then right after Christmas, I hear nothing until Christmas break happens. We close over Christmas. They do it, and then at that point, on January 3rd, I'm brought into the office or into his office, and he says, "Yeah, come with me. Bring your resume." I did a 7-minute interview with who would be my future boss. We agreed we could work together, and that's how I was transferred and saved from a layoff. But the reason all of that transpired, because I feel like it was really meant to be, because I was actually replacing somebody who was terminally ill. And that person actually mentored me for the last 6 months of their life.
Wow.
And I think from that day forward, I recognized that not only was growth, I had always strived working in tech to grow technically. That's just the nature of it, right? You don't want to be out of date, because next thing you know, you don't have a job.
Right.
And so that propelled it. But this changed everything in terms of my desire for mentorship, my desire to grow, and how much I had to pay back, because when he supported me and mentored me, it was not just of, hey, here's what you do in the job, but when you're terminally ill, it became full life mentorship, right? I learned so much from him of the intangibles of life that I never would have received otherwise. And ever since then, it's been all about understanding that growth and understanding where I'm at. Took a lot of stuttering and figuring things out before I kind of figured it out, because I think we all have lots of tools, and we've always been given a lot of tools, but nobody teaches us how to practice those tools and how to implement those things well, and things like that. And I think that's where I've really practiced as of late, is really spending that time to really implement things in a big way to really transform.
Yeah, and something I'm hearing as well is that it stems from a desire to interact with another too. Like it's a personal growth tool. It's useful. It's a space that I operate in, but the one thing that is consistent with everybody that I'm working with when it comes to their personal growth is that we're working together. We're working together. It's not a one-person exercise. Like even me just being in the room, keeping my mouth shut and listening, they are not alone in the practice of what they're doing. And that story is so powerful for such a variety of reasons. The obvious one being what a selfless act on someone's part to even take the time to do something like that in the final 6 months of their life. But at the same time, as you said there, like whether it be from him, whether it be from somebody else, a peer, a friend, a member of your family, whatever it may be, wherever you find yourself in life, having the tools is one thing. But being able to build a connection with somebody that understands you enough and is willing to get to understand you enough to then help you see how best to use those tools. I'm hearing that in your story, man. Like that's where that's when things really started to build traction for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the first piece. It's like now I'm an avid mentor, and we talk about the podcast, which I do, which I'm helping people grow, and the Mentorship Live. Even though the naming is kind of weird, it's actually a job search mentorship group. So we literally help those who are unemployed, looking for roles in any way. It's open to the public, and it's just a kind of a general Q&A, everything from venting to stress relief to resume questions to interview questions and all the above. And it's just a way we can give back. And there's a few of us that co-host that, and that one's been going for 4 years now. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to touch on it briefly while we're on it. And because it's something, it's so funny, as recently as just the last day or two, I've been working with some of my own clients on, they're trying to practice some mentorship within their organization. And here I am as a coach, and I'm trying to kind of help them, like, well, coaching and mentoring is not the same thing, and all this kind of stuff. And talk to me a little bit about that, because you alluded to it there. It's like kind of an interesting name for this LinkedIn Live event,
Yeah.
but then you started to articulate how you use the space. So I would love
Yeah.
just to get your opinion, having been in the position of leadership and influence now for at least a decade, if not more.
Yeah.
You know, when you use that word mentorship, talk to me about your definition and your intention behind the word.
Yeah. That's actually a great question, because you're right. The coaching is an amazing thing. Mentorship is an amazing thing, but they are not one and the same,
Mm-mm.
and so vastly different. And I think one thing is, one person's mentorship isn't necessarily another person's mentorship, and I think that's where the real challenge comes in.
Sure.
I used to work for a boss who disliked mentorship, but I'm an avid mentor, so I just forgot to tell him about all the mentorship I did. But if I look at the things that the people that I work with, everybody kind of needs something different.
Mm-hmm.
But what they need to know is, A, how do they, the way I look at mentorship is like, how can I shortcut your process to getting to that next stage, to learn from my lessons, but yet go through the lessons that you need to go through so that you can succeed. Because if I do all the work for you, it doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
And I've traveled that road and made many mistakes doing that. Right? It's really easy to get on your soapbox
Mm-hmm.
and talk, and it's really easy to just pontificate in front of somebody who's like a college senior, and oh, here's all the things you should go do. But their life is different, and the way they interact with people is different, and their experiences are different, and so forth. And I think one of the things that, when I look at mentorship or all the opportunities I've had to grow, most of them came because I was lucky enough to shortcut some things, which allowed me to focus on the other lessons I needed to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Because so then we're basically the goal would be to amplify somebody's growth, right?
Yeah.
If you could take 6 lessons away, they're still going to have 10.
Yeah.
But if they've got 6 they don't have to think about, that's only 4 that they've got to go deal with to figure out, and they can put more investment into that and be even better there, and then continue to amplify from there.
And you see something that you're touching on there. Firstly, go rewind about a minute and a half if you're listening and listen to Glenn's definition of mentorship again, because it's phenomenal. I mean, I just want to articulate that to begin with. But secondly, this notion of providing a space to make it about the other person that's where coaching and mentoring is very much aligned. However, we do get that wrong on the mentoring side sometimes, as we think it's going to be like, hey, me mentor, I'm bringing in my giant encyclopedia of experience, and I'm just going to hit you with the whole thing over the head, and you're just going to try to take on whatever you're going to take on. But that notion to create the shared space to understand where exactly is this person on their journey right now, and to use your phrase, how can I help them shortcut the process? How can I help them shortcut it in a way to where it's not necessarily avoiding that opportunity to develop? You're still educating them, but you're doing it at a more advanced rate because of what you've been exposed to and the experience you have.
Yeah, I think the other thing I think about also is the fact that, where is the person at?
Exactly.
Right? There are some people that they're new to mentorship, they're new to coaching, they're new to all of this, and they don't even know what to ask. And so at that point, there's no good dialogue that's happening. It's clumsy, it's ugly, and unfortunately, a lot of people just give up during that time. But the reality is, sometimes they need that a little bit extra push, and they need that a little bit more pontification at the very beginning, so that they understand what questions they can ask.
Right.
But you have to be open to those questions, and then you can kind of build that relationship. And then eventually, you get to some mentorships like I have now, where we mentor each other. Right? And I've got senior leaders that I have as mentors.
Yeah.
But I also mentor to them as someone who's in my role, and I can help them understand why they're seeing some things, or why that is. I think it's powerful to be able to mentor in both ways.
Yes.
Right. And I think one of the things I aspire to, and anytime I mentor, is to make sure that it's something that is cyclical. Because I can learn just as much, maybe from somebody who's young, or somebody who's got different career experiences, things like that. And there's always that opportunity to grow, because you never know where the nugget is going to come from. And I think I spearhead that back to when I was early in security. I was driving security development in a company. We were just in the very beginning and infancy of it. It was almost 20 years ago, working on how do we secure this work. And there weren't other companies to go look at, things like that. I actually went and visited the local police department and asked, how are you doing it? You're a city that's growing like crazy. You're not getting funded. You don't get the money till the taxes come in. they've got things. They're like, well, yeah, well, we use this rusted out police car and we put a radar detector in there so people slow down on the street. And there are all sorts of different things that they did. And I think that was a great example of how information can flow from industry to industry, from area to area, from mentee to mentor to mentee, in so many different ways that can be so incredibly powerful. And you just don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah, yeah. There's so much good to what you're talking to here. Something I really want to bring back around that you just said there in the last minute or so is not to allow yourself in this mentoring position to assume that it is one directional, like me mentee, you mentor. And you kind of actually gave me just a little bit of an awakening myself, is that a lot of people will ask me that, like, Steve, you've gotten to where you've gotten to, you've done what you've done. Surely there's some people along the way that have mentored you. And I always push back and I go, I really struggle to find like this one person that just grabbed my attention and I hung on to their every word for weeks and months and years at a time. But then the way you're explaining it now, I go, you know what? I had a lot of reciprocal relationships like that, where on any given day, one of us was playing the role of mentor and one of us was playing the role of mentee. And I've always looked at it more as just great friend, great colleague, whatever it may be. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there's, and I think anyone listens to this, I would like to think that you're having that same epiphany in this moment, if you weren't aware of it already, is that there are people that are mentoring you. You're just not looking at them as a mentor, so to speak.
And it's not necessarily a formal process, right? We think of it as a formal process.
Exactly.
And I work at a large company. I work at Microsoft, and so we've got programs upon programs upon programs to help facilitate all of this.
Right.
But some of my best mentorship conversations I have are like the conversations I have with you, or the conversations, and a lot of that for me and where my podcast came from was all out of COVID, right? It's like, hey, I'm starved for this hallway conversation that I'm no longer getting.
Yeah.
And how do I get that? Let's talk to interesting people.
Yes.
And then you just start reaching out and you have those conversations, and those become, the things I learned from you, the things I've learned from others have been huge in terms of that. And I think the other part is always never hesitate to think about that mentorship and communication in this way should happen across fields, right? It's not just, hey, I work in cybersecurity, so I'm just going to go talk to cybersecurity folks, right? My biggest wins are talking to coaches and talking to athletes and talking to other people who've done big things in different ways, because sometimes, or trying to do the thing that you're trying to do in some way, but it doesn't have to be the same thing.
Right.
It can be. There's a much broader facet where there's a ton of lessons to be learned and amazing relationships to be had as well.
And there's something that's really coming across to me, because again, it reminds me of the conversations I was having, just like I referenced earlier a day or two ago, in that anyone listening to this, if you've ever been refraining from sort of titling yourself a mentor because you're struggling with this notion of, how am I an expert on this, on this, on this? I think so much encouragement you should be taking from what you're providing here, Glenn, is like, at the end of the day, it's not about expertise. It's really not. It's about that desire to want to support. And like, hey, I may not have the exact answer for you, but if I'm curious enough just to step in with a willingness to support, and we go right back now to some of these words that you initially said in that first question, is like having that willingness and being willing to respond to an individual. Like, hey, do you have a minute? Can I talk to you? The moment you say yes to that, you're actually asserting yourself as a potential mentor. You just don't have the title for it, and you're not putting too many stakes around it. You're just simply opening your mind to it.
Yeah, and I think one of the pieces of advice I do have for folks is, if you are looking for a mentor, or you look for someone to be your mentor, some people are just scared of the term mentorship. Because all of a sudden in their head they say, oh, somebody wants 6 hours a week and for 6 years or maybe 10 years, and they see the big, right? They don't see the little piece of time that they may be, and it's never going to be as big as you think it's going to be, because life in general is just getting in the way of that. But I think the other thing to think about is just that not only does it not have to be, you don't have to think about it that way, but always, if you're going to do it, don't go straight with the ask. The problem is, if somebody says that, like there's no skin in the game for them. I think one of the things, and we talk a ton about this on Mentorship Live, is it's the traditional thing about networking, right? When you're doing it, it's not all about you. It's about them. Get to know them, Ask about the things that they're working on. Ask about those things, and then that helps build the relationship. And then you can make an ask, or you can say, "Hey, I'd love to do a one-on-one to understand more about this." And in some ways, that's exactly how we met.
Yeah.
Because you were on what was it, the Tag Along podcast years ago, and I reached out after that because I was really interested in the work that you were doing, and here we are, years later, recording another podcast.
That's right.
So
That's right.
it pays off in so many ways, and it puts you in different rooms than you're normally in, and I think that's really important as well. A great example is that happened last week for me. I, much like with you, I reach out to a lot of people and stuff like that, and there was a music artist who was traveling through Seattle early stage. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's I didn't get to see her show because I found out about it like 20 minutes before it was happening. So obviously I wasn't going to be there, but I'm great to see you in town. Hope you had a great show. And they responded back.
Yeah.
And then we started a conversation. And then next thing I know, they're like, "Hey, I'm releasing a new single. Here's a Zoom." So I jump on the Zoom last week, and there are 14 of us, and we're there to see the world premiere of her video, and to hear the song, and all of those things. And there's me, about 7 other fans, and some record executives that were there. And it's like, that's a room I never would have been in without asking. Yeah. Was it career beneficial? Not necessarily, unless I can get around the podcast. But for the most part, it's about putting yourself in a different space, because you can learn constantly in the different space. Because to hear the challenges and the fact that she recorded she recorded the music video in the club that turned her down 6 times to perform in before she was allowed to perform in it, and now she's recording the video there. I mean, that's a big thing for a musical artist to be able to do. Right. But you can learn so much from those things and from others.
Absolutely, man. And this is I'm so glad that we started with this, that we went down this path with mentorship and even discussed what we've discussed here, because it's now landed us in this place that is such an important lesson when it comes to growth. Is that if you're going to make every decision based on the what's in it for me and what do I get out of this and all this, there's going to be such a limited path that you can take that's going to actually immediately block you off to so many other opportunities. And like you said, there's that desire to say, hey, get in the room. If it's a different room, it's a different room. But at the heart of it, if you're open to how you can grow and how you can learn and how you can meet others, and what that, again, my podcast, I wrote about this on social media recently as we're recording this. I'm 6.5 years in at this point. All I did was start a podcast because to so many of the reasons that you did, like, I just wanted to create conversations and have some sort of community around some areas that I was passionate about. I had no idea it was going to lead me to what it's led me to, and put me in rooms and have these opportunities to talk to people. Exactly.
It's like, I never dreamed I'd be talking to Olympic athletes and folks like yourself and music artists and and the funniest thing is, came full circle moment. My most recent episode is actually somebody who I went to high school with, who's had a crazy journey in life, and I think it's important to share all of those journeys, right? Some of our lives are amazing, and we have amazing turns, and then things veer off course drastically at times, and that's okay. Right? You have to learn how to travel that journey and grow through it, and so forth. And so we all have lessons to share. I think one last thing on mentorship. I had a intern here over I guess she was a fall intern. So she was here for about 12 weeks or so. And I was mentoring. I was her mentor. And it was a great experience. And then the next thing I know, about halfway through, she's mentoring other people. Because she had learned from me that it isn't just about who you are or that you're senior or whatever, is that you have a different experience. She had many internships in the past. Like, she had like 6 or 7 internships. So she was pretty experienced for an intern. And there's other people who are like, this is really like their first full-time job. They're trying to figure out, I'm supposed to show up and dress appropriately for work. Or there's lots of different things, stages at that level, right? And so she started mentoring there, and she started mentoring in other places, because it's not about that you have to wait forever to mentor. It's just about you have to be ready to share what you know, and be willing to share that, and be willing to be vulnerable. And I think the other piece about that is if you're going into it with ego, it's not going to go well. If you go into it with empathy and to be vulnerable, you're going to build relationships like you never could imagine.
Yeah, and there's so many traits here that you're just starting to knock out and allow us to hear this notion that really do describe and define at the heart of it what growth is, and you even use that the readiness component as well as it's not waiting necessarily for those times when you know you're ready to do this or anything like that. It's just, hey, just immerse yourself in it. And I want to now shift to that notion of the immersive components of your life, and especially professionally. We talked about this off air right before we started recording, and you've mentioned it a couple times where you work in tech, you work with Microsoft. If someone was to say, if I was to ask somebody a question, hey, name a company in the last 50 years that has experienced growth, someone's going to say Microsoft. Like, everyone's going to say Microsoft, somewhere between 1 and 10. So you've been in it now for I believe at least 15, 18 years, something like that.
It's about 13 years here, but 20 years in the field.
Got it.
And watch the drastic growth at both companies. I think in the end, it's we're just at a precipice where a lot of these things just are explosive in growth.
Yes. And you've been at the heart of it, though. You've been immersed in it. Sorry, so again, when you think about that explosive nature that you've been in the center of, and you're one of obviously thousands and thousands of people within these organizations. At the same time, one thing we don't talk enough about within this podcast, honestly, is what it means when you're immersed in something that is so much bigger than you, that is growing at this pretty incredible rate. Like, for you, talk to us a little bit about what that's been like from your perspective, just to simply be immersed in an environment that is just continually growing at such an extreme nature.
Yeah, I think you really have to come to it, and I don't necessarily like using the term, but you do have to come to it with a particular mindset. Because I think it can be very easy to be discouraged at a company that is growing at this phase, because you're like, hey, I'm marching down this path. No, you're not. You're going over here, and you're going over here, and part of that's just because you are trying to figure out how do you scale this, right? For an example, the project or the type of things that I work on, it starts out small, but I have 7 core stakeholders. That doesn't seem too bad. Those represent just a tiny group to make sure sanity reigns. Then I have to work with every business within Microsoft. Oh, and then I have to go to every developer in Microsoft, which is now 200,000 people that I'm affecting with every sentence I write.
Right.
So it grows, and so I have to think about scale. I have to think about speed. I have to think about all of these other things. And so you have to come to it with a mindset of humor and of growth and not dread. And I think I see people who come in here and dread the fact that, oh, it's busy, and oh, there's all these things, and yes, we move fast, and absolutely, if we didn't, the world would not be very happy with us. Sure. I think that it's one of the natures of working at a company like this, and so I think I come to it from a place of appreciation of the fact that I get to work on something, and I love the fact that the systems I'm working on are some of the world's largest, right? Because that fuels me, because I appreciate that. They would very easily be discouraged with, I could probably work for 6 days and not get today's work done. I could be really discouraged in that.
Right.
But I also recognize that this is a luxury problem. This isn't a bad problem to have. It's about learning how to navigate that, and I think in some ways it's navigating the mindset of how do you tackle work, and then I think the other piece of it that's interesting is understanding how to deal with prioritization even when there's confusion in prioritization. Because there are times, right, when you're moving this fast, it feels like you have 20 priority zeros and 20 priority ones. So it turns into priority 01A, 01B, 01C, and you're like, did we really do a prioritization exercise here? But I think that you really have to work on trimming things down and really focusing on things, and really truly seeing how things are done. I think one of the other big differences between here and most of the other companies I've worked is the fact that we aren't measured by hard work. We're measured by impact. And I think that change and that shift, and especially the emphasis on impact, allows you as an individual to figure out, how do I focus that effort to be impactful which does allow you to trim away some of the other noise that you have, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of things we'd love to do, but aren't terribly impactful. And then there's other things that are really impactful that we can do, that we can change things. And I'm working on a change right now that's incredibly important for the industry, for the world, in terms of how we deal with cryptography and quantum computing. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of technical stuff behind the scenes on that, and by no means am I the expert. I'm just part of the larger group that's working on it. Right. And I think when I look at those types of things, I have to be cognizant of the fact that yes, that can be really impactful work for myself, for the company, for the world, but it also has direct consequence, right? I'm about to go tell 200,000 developers what they can and can't do. Mm. That's a lot of people doing a lot of different things that we need to do to make sure it all falls in alignment. And so again, I think a lot of that and the speed of change and those types of things are required because of the rapid change, especially with AI and all the changes that happen every 30 seconds or so. It seems you just need to learn how to pivot and do it. But I think the other piece is I also don't take nothing becomes your baby. Right? We always have these projects that are our baby, and we get hurt and we get emotionally hurt with it when somebody calls it ugly or it's a problem or things like that. And I think one of the things I've learned is we also kind of need to detach ourselves a little bit more from that. Yes. We certainly take value in doing everything we're doing, but we also recognize that the landscape can change so drastically so quickly that your baby grows from 18 months to 200 years old in a matter of days or weeks. Right. And so you have to be able to recognize, it's time for retirement. That's got to go. This other thing has to happen. And we have to kind of work through that as well. Absolutely take care of it like it's your baby when you start. Sure. But don't bring that internal. Yeah. Yeah. And
the consistent theme that I'm hearing as you sort of articulate all of this is obviously comfort with change. Getting really comfortable with change, and especially in something that is so high stakes as you've articulated so well for us. And stakes is something that I talk a lot about, specifically when I'm on a stage, just saying to people like when we talk about accountability and we talk about dealing with challenges, etc. We really need to understand the stakes, and we don't often acknowledge those. And I think, speaking from my own perspective, and I'd love to learn yours too, is like for me, part of the benefit of acknowledging the stakes on the front end is it actually makes a lot of what you're speaking to here easier. Like that ability to sort of have more of an open mind, even approach a couple things with humor, be open to change, because you're so. And again, to align that notion, that part of it as well with the impact. Like if you don't know the stakes, it's really hard to understand where the impact's going to land, right? And where you are of impact and where you're lacking impact. And so for me, so much of what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But I'd love for you to maybe articulate in your own words too, is like the importance of acknowledging those stakes on the front end when you're approaching all these aspects that you approach.
I think especially when you're doing things at such high speed with such change, I think you have to. If you're not thinking 30 steps ahead, and this sounds cumbersome and complicated, and it's not really. But you have to think 30 steps ahead. And I think we talk a lot about, in business we talk a lot about walk back plans and how do we get to the end and things like that. And this is a little bit more exponential. And I think I read in the book. I'm gonna get the title wrong. It's about 10x. And basically
10x
growing
is better than 2x.
That's the one. Yep. But I think that's a lot of what the thinking that you have to do in this stage is more about that 10x piece, right? I'm working on something, internal to Microsoft, very, very, very important for us to do. But the numbers of if somebody said, hey, here's a task list of things in a project, it would scare the crap out of anybody. But if I look at the things that we have to do and what we have to deliver and what the impact is to others, it's like, well, of course, that's the right thing. So now how do I get back there? And again, sometimes it's not about the to-do and it's not about the task. It's about the strategy and understanding the strategy and being able to go at that level. Because if you're stuck in the task, it's fantastic that you get some things done, but you're going to get overwhelmed by those things because the tasks, again, because of the scale and because of the thing, my task list from yesterday to today, while working on the very same things, is like 70% different
Hmm.
because so much has shifted, even in the last day,
Yeah.
that I've had to adjust. And
Yeah.
some of those things are like, huh, that's no longer prioritized. That's out. These other things are in, and I just have to kind of work through that as I manage it, um, and recognize that tasks are very transitory, and
Hmm.
we get so baked into to dos, and all these to do lists and all these lists everywhere. And Lord knows I've got notebooks full of them, but I also recognize that they're very transitory. Just because they're on my paper doesn't mean they're going to be the right thing to get done at the right time,
Right. I love
because
that.
that is going to change probably 15 times by the time I get off this call with different things,
Yes. Yes.
with so many things in flight.
Yeah, and you've used this word prioritization a lot, and I love
Mm-hmm.
even just the sort of humorous way you're using it as well, because it is very common practice, sadly, in this day and age, is that we do start with like, let's make a list of priorities, and once you get to
Mm-hmm.
about the fifth one, you're like, are we using the word priority incorrectly at this point?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the name of the book has vanished from me right now, but there's a phenomenal book out there that actually goes back to the history of the word priority, and it was in fact a
Yeah.
singular term
Yeah.
when it was, and then we've destroyed it in the Western world. Just like, we've put A's and B's and C's next to it, and so many
Yeah.
numbers. But anyway, my point being is that what you're touching on here is how can we, on our journey within our growth, whether it's in our business, within our career, within our lives, how can we get comfort, not necessarily get good at creating priorities, but actually
Mm-hmm.
find comfort in the shift of our priorities as and when the shift is required? Because there are
Yeah.
so many different things. Something that I actually wrote down early on in the conversation, you talked about working in tech and that you had to
Mm-hmm.
work technically in tech. And what I love about that insight too is my mind immediately goes to, well, this is just one lane of Glenn. This is just one
Yeah.
lane of Glenn's growth.
Right.
And I'm sure at any point in his day, like to your point, that to-do list, the priorities are always moving within that
Mm-hmm.
particular lane. But then there's maybe other lanes in your life where the priorities are actually really consistent, and that it's about actually
Yeah.
just simply executing the same thing daily in order
Yeah.
to shift that part of your
Mm-hmm.
growth journey along. So how,
Yeah.
how do you find that balance? Because I know you're obviously so committed to all of it. So how do you find that
Yeah.
balance?
Yeah. I do my best. It's not easy,
No.
by any stretch. My wife will attest to that.
Right.
I struggle many ways. I think there's a few things that I've really, um, done in terms of doing that. I think part of that is also, I think, learning how to deal with, or all the change and all the inconsistency and all the constant change and stuff.
Mm.
Actually, the best training ground I actually ever had was improv. When I did improv
Oh,
training,
interesting.
that, as a business person, that was one of the best things I ever could have done.
I love that.
And for anybody who's afraid of that, the first thing I say is, after the first day, I came back to work like I'd done a massive core workout, but it was because I was laughing so hard that
Right.
that I was sore from laughing.
Yeah.
So it's the best thing you can do, and the other part is failure is gold.
Right.
I think that's one of the pieces that
I love
really kind of helps me deal with the scenarios that I'm in, and also see some of the humor, because sometimes it's the absurd humor. I'm like, you're asking me to do what? Huh? And and I'm thinking about all the other priorities and all these other things. I'm like, that's right. You failed math.
that. Mm.
1 + 1 does not equal 40. Now, how do we
Right.
get you to where it needs to be? But if I take a humorous look at it and come from that direction, it changes my mindset on a lot of those things and allows me to de-stress a little bit as part
Mm-hmm.
of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other pieces that I've really learned and is to really understand how to go inside myself
Mm.
and understand not just what is in my way of doing it, because business is going to throw tons of things that are in your way. It's just the nature of life and stuff, and you can't control any of those things. They're just going to come at you. But how you respond and how you choose to respond, you can control. And I've spent a lot of time working on, with coaches and with myself, just working on how do I find that introspection of, where is this coming from? How did I get here?
Mm.
And what do I need to know to move past that? Because so much of what I've, done in my life, I was several years ago, I was working on this big project where we were um, we were doing evaluations of groups, and we were doing these things, and it turned into this monstrosity of a paper. because somebody wanted this big thing, and it was fantastic to review and everything else. It was really good ideas, but for me, I was getting in my head.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is this so hard? I don't understand why this is so hard. Well, years ago, I had struggled in English class. I had attempted to write a book, and we'll just say I didn't get along with the editor at all. It was a very adversarial relationship, and so all I had was negative context around writing, and all of that was getting in the way of this. But the reality is that none of that actually had to do with the writing that I was doing. Right. Yes, they are being precise, but this is a secure technical document with lots of details. Yeah. It should be precise. It's the nature of the thing. And so I had to go back and relearn that the feedback was really not about me, but about bettering the document and bettering the process and bettering the teams, and really take it away. Because in the end, one of the things that happens as we do this and we get wrapped in our heads, we're taking on responsibility for things that we don't need to. Yeah. We are taking on and literally wasting tons of time. If you look at the amount of time you spend spinning and compare it to action, we'd have 6 more businesses because we'd have that much extra time, or we'd be able to do tons of different things because of that. And I think learning how to look back, but also recognize the emotion that's calling it out and why, but what did you really need to learn in that facet, and things. I mean, I just did that recently. I've been working on my snacking because, well, Christmas was around the corner, or was just recently, and I was partaking. I was partaking quite well in Christmas, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It tasted wonderful. But then I went back and I looked back and I'm like, oh, where'd that come from? Oh, that came from oh, it was an escape valve when I was in high school when I was studying. And I'm like, oh. Why was I doing that? Oh, because my mom was pressuring me. Okay, to study. Go figure. I should study when you're in high school. But yeah, I didn't like it. But but you should do that. Right. But she was responding in that way because of what had happened in her childhood. And I'm like, suddenly I'm just like, hold it. So something from the 1940s is telling me I should be fat today. Right. Really? What is happening here? Right. And being able to kind of work through that and kind of bake that into understanding of, oh, this isn't even mine to carry. Or is this something that's just, I need to know a lesson, like, do I belong in the room? Right. I'm sure something that lots of your listeners are challenged with. I've been challenged with. It's like, when I'm talking with people, it's like, they literally wrote the book. It's on the shelf right over here. They literally wrote the book on the subject. Matter of fact, 6 or 7 volumes on the subject. And I'm having these conversations of differing opinions and stuff, and recognizing that I am in the room for a reason. Yeah. Right. And those types of things. And all of that comes out of being able to do that retrospection and be able to understand and kind of really explore the boundary between your conscious and your subconscious. Yep. And I think that we don't spend enough time in silence doing that. Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mention it like that, because while some people maybe listen to this and being like, maybe therapy is good for me to sort of work on some of this stuff, and like 100% it is. However, if that's not a place that you're really ready to go do, or you see the need for, what does it look like to find moments of silence? Because everything that you're speaking to here, Glenn, quite frankly, is there's opportunities within every single day to actually just press pause and assess, like, because we'll get into a certain mindset and a certain mood at a certain point in the day. Absolutely. And the chances are there's something that transpired a couple of hours earlier that has somehow created this lining in our minds that is now dictating the way we're looking at everything, receiving everything from this point on. And it can be such a quick solve. It really can. Yeah. If we're willing just to take that 1 minute, I would argue, just to press pause and get introspective. Yeah, it is very quick, but it is not easy. No. In this society. Yes. And I think we mistaken quick for easy. Sure. And I think as well. But I think as I look back and I see these things, and I'm like moving 100 miles a minute, it's like as soon as I'm off with here, I'm onto another call, which I'm then on to another call, and all they're going to do is assign me things that I have to do before the next call, which I don't know if I have actually free time before those calls.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm having these conversations and I'm having these challenges that pop up, I think one of the things I go back to is, and over time you can get better at this, is taking that moment. And when I talk about a moment, it's like, hey, I'm crazy busy. But it's like, hey, I walked to the bathroom. Hey, I walked
Right.
and got a cup of coffee. Those are the moments. And people are like, one of the things that I've chosen to do, because I work in an office 5 days a week, is I no longer go straight to my phone. Right? There's that stress moment, and we go to the phone.
Yep.
Right? And maybe it's social media, maybe it's something else, but it's the distraction that we're looking for.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've chosen to do is I actually now walk around the office
Hmm.
to do that. It allows me to network with people.
Yep.
It changes my state because who the heck knows what's around the corner. Um, I think the other part is I've also learned to build in, have, if you're in an office environment, have people around you that you kind of have permission to be your funny yourself with.
Hmm.
I have one of those folks down the hall. She sits there, and her windows open up to a hallway straight down, so she sees everybody who walks through.
Yeah.
And I just kind of sneak up and try to surprise her or whatever, and so forth. And we both get a good laugh out of it, and we move on. But again, it shifts my context and it
Yeah.
switches my state.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to do those things, and
Mm-hmm.
and don't be afraid to embrace your inner 4-year-old to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent, and use that to help change your state. But again, it's these little breaks that you take. Be intentional with them.
Yes.
Don't be unintentional with them.
Yes.
It's like I'll sit back. I'm like, okay, I'll be working through something in my head and stuff like that. But then I'll find the humorous moment in something. I'll find these other things, and that helps me change state. And then the more I do that, the more I can then start, because that's like the first inch, and then you have to travel that next inch, which is how do you get to silence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And get to that quiet, and that's easier said than done. I know. Sometimes I get that in the car. Sometimes I do that in other areas. I think one of the best things I do is lift heavy in workouts, because I don't want to drop that shit on my feet, so I don't think
Yep.
about anything else. I want to keep my feet.
I've never thought of it that way, but that is a great point, man. That's a great
Yeah, I
point.
mean, you are concentrating because there's heavy weight, and
It's so
I
true.
prefer my body to be in one piece. So
Right.
so for me, that's one. Or and I think that's why running didn't. I love running and
Yep.
stuff like that, but running is a different thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can easily focus and do something in your head there, whereas here it's about clearing, right? And so focus on things that help you clear,
Yeah.
clear that head, because then you'll be able to really start to fine tune that and start listening to your subconscious. I've been lucky, and I think I'm fairly tuned into it, because I learned early on in my life that it was an important thing to do, because that actually came from my grandmother. I was lucky enough to have a grandmother, or actually both of my grandmothers were very, very in tune
Yeah.
with things. My one of my grandmothers used to say, "I'm sending you wigwams." I'm like, what is this? But suddenly I'm like, oh, she's tuning into the kind of the universal energy and starting to understand this, and as I started studying different things and different aspects, and I think that's the other piece for me that's changed everything, is I don't just study technology. I don't just study people.
Exactly.
I explore this whole personal growth thing in every which direction. So it's like, hey, I dig into energy work. I dig into mind work. I dig into how do I grow as a business? How do I speak? How do I do? I have a smattering of everything, and I think a lot of that helps come together
Yeah.
to be that. But don't never be afraid to explore yourself. And I
Yeah.
think so many of us are so focused on either career or trying to figure out what's going on with the family or whatever of those things. I think spending that time on you is important. It's that oxygen mask, just like on an airplane.
It is.
You need to actually do. And sometimes that's your workout. Sometimes that's doing, studying on things, or using a coach, and then using different modalities of coaches as well. Because not every coach is the same and thinks the same way and does the same thing and so forth. And then I guess one other very quick separate thing is I also believe in kind of I've got a 3-person group that I work with. We talk about, maybe I should go to therapy, whatever. I work with a wellness coach. I work with my performance coach, and I work with a therapist.
Yeah.
They each have their space. They're really good at it,
Yep.
right? My therapist is great at asking really good questions.
Mm-hmm.
Also great at helping me dwell,
Right.
but really good at asking good questions.
Yeah.
My performance coach is great at taking those questions and helping me focus those and get rid of the problem.
Right.
And my wellness coach helps make sure I'm actually thinking about all the other things in my life to
Yeah.
make sure I'm more well-rounded.
Right.
And I think
Doing those things
between those
without it
three,
coming at the expense of yourself, like for instance.
yeah,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
exactly. And so because I've been able to do those things, it's gotten me through so many of the crazy
Mm.
challenges I've had in life.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And one thing I always like to do is almost like paint a very basic equation for folks when you articulate so much info as you have. You provided so much insight and opportunities for people to take whatever they want to take from this. But at the same time,
Yeah.
there's something that you said there about this notion of getting clear on your responsibilities. And I think part of the avoidance, part of the escapes that we try to create sometimes is because we've taken on too much. We've taken on more responsibilities than we need to take on. And we're now trying to avoid some of that. And if,
Yeah.
in order to really practice some of this silence and some of this personal growth and personal investment, I really want to encourage folks to sort of hear what Glenn's speaking to here, in the sense of, by doing that work around what you truly are responsible for and getting comfortable and finding joy in that, once you really get to that point, the desire and the appetite to actually dedicate time towards working on yourself, as opposed to simply going to your phone and having these avoidance tactics, whatever it may be, that stuff slowly starts to fade away, because you're excited to get 5 minutes to yourself to reflect on, wow, think of the work that I've just done and all these things that I'm accountable and have ownership for, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because I think even like with my therapist, right? She asked me a brilliant question. I'm like, oh man, damn, how did I not see that? It's like right in front of my face, but I needed somebody else to say it, right? And I have that, but my answer isn't necessarily, and this is, how I choose to do it, not necessarily how everybody should do it, is I do go through and I'm like, okay, so again, it's a great question. And I know there's this pile of things that happened in life that caused me to think that way. But what's that lesson? What did I need to know? What do I really need to know to bake that in? And really understand that odds are this is a series of patterns that were created by society, not myself.
Right.
I didn't. None of us choose our programming.
Right.
It's all generously donated by society, our parents, and everyone else, and we think of it as the gospel.
Right.
And I think that's one of the true challenges, is really learning how to write your patterns so that they are working constructively for you.
Yep.
Because there's no right or wrong in any of that.
Yep.
I can't change the fact that certain things have happened to you,
Yep.
but you can change how you respond to those things.
Yep.
And some of those things may have been horrifying and horrible, and I'm never underpinning what somebody has gone through. But I think even the things that I felt like were some of the worst moments in my life also had flip sides. And they were some of the best moments in my life, because I learned to overcome, because I learned to do these other things, because I learned from challenges that do that, and find the growth. Don't dwell in the pain.
Love that. What an insight, man, to actually maybe bring this thing to a close, because when someone says something as articulate as that, I want to say, I don't want to ruin the ending. This is a great ending right there. But what I do want to really emphasize too is that, here we spent 50 minutes talking to each other here, and you've mentioned this a couple of times. I really want this to be a key takeaway for folks listening, is that here you are as someone that is representing a particular industry, in that of tech. And there's stereotypes, right, that come with that. Like there's a certain, like you're a tech guy, you're very one-dimensional. This is how you work, blah blah blah, all this kind of stuff. But as you've so beautifully articulated here, is that there's always a reason to be as holistic as you can possibly be when it comes to you and your growth. And the more curious you are about that, and the more you pursue that kind of work, the more likely it is, I would argue, that even in that lane that you're maybe known for, and that people will maybe even make a judgment about you around, you're going to be able to actually optimize yourself in that space too, because you're now resourcing from so many other areas. You're going to see things in that lane that you would have otherwise missed, because you're able to see things differently, more holistically, more complete when you're working within that world too. And listen, man, I know we could probably go another hour, no doubt. But the thing I want to make sure that everyone has access to before I let you go is where we can find you, where we can connect with you, how we can connect with you, all of those things. So please make sure, go ahead, provide
Very
all
good.
that for us now.
I'm available on pretty much most of the social media platforms, at either Glenn Leifhiet or at GLEFHIE. Mouthful, I know. And then my podcast is From Stuck to Growth, which is available on all podcast platforms. And Mentorship Live is held weekly every Friday for those people who are looking for jobs. And we don't necessarily give jobs away. We'd love to be Oprah and just hand them out all over the place, but that we can't necessarily do that. But we can help you navigate. We're there every week at 10:30 Pacific, 1:30 Central, or I'm sorry, 1:30 Eastern, and they can reach that at literally just sign on at aka.ms/mentorship live, and that will just literally log them right into the call, and they're more than welcome. We usually have between 20 and 45 people on, and it's general Q&A, and we just take it where it needs to go that week, much like you do with a podcast. It's just
that's right.
Whatever. And last week is definitely different than this week, and right. The following week will be way different than that. All depends on the people and the problems and where we're at in society and all of those things.
Awesome. Well, all that information will be in the show notes, as we always make sure we include that. But listen, brother, this has been an absolute blast. I'm so glad that we've had a chance to do this finally. And just, you have a fan and a cheerleader in me, and I'm always supportive of all your work. And just know that you've always got a welcome spot to come back on the show, maybe at some point in the next 250 episodes, if that sounds good to you.
Good. I'd be honored. It's a blast talking to you every time, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks.
And my thanks to Glenn for joining us on today's episode. Such a wonderful conversation, and quite frankly, I got a side of Glenn that I've never gotten before, because every time to speak to so much of the insights that he provided, every time we connect, he has evolved in some way, shape, or form. It's something I pride myself on always trying to strive for too. But we connect about every 4 to maybe 6 months, and we've done that over about a 2-year span now. And the Glenn that I got to speak with today is not the same Glenn that I met 2 years ago, which really speaks so much to everything that he provided within the conversation. But if there's one thing that I really want to just encourage you to do, is what might that way of aligning responsibilities look like in your world, to where you can look at everything you're responsible for and say, I feel great about all of this. I don't feel as though I'm biting off more than I can chew. I don't feel as though I'm responsible for something that doesn't give me some form of a return, that doesn't allow me to give some form or create, some form of an impact, to where I no longer feel the need to be distracting myself in any way, shape, or form. I feel comfortable about knowing that as and when I get opportunities for a break, for time for me, whether it be walking to the restroom, going to see a colleague around the office, or grabbing coffee, grabbing lunch with a friend, you're not seeing opportunities to distract yourself. You're actually seeing these opportunities to be investing in yourself and to be making time for yourself and finding ways to simply re-energize and go back to these items and these areas in your life that you're responsible for, but most importantly, you're excited to be providing impact within as well. Easier said than done, I know. I'm not saying this as like, hey, just cast the net across everything you're responsible for right now and remove everything that doesn't give you some form of a return of impact, joy, etc. I know it's not that easy, but anything like this is gradual steps. What might be one thing you can remove right now that you know is a responsibility that you simply don't need to have? And what might that do in terms of freeing you up mentally and energetically to just simply invest a little bit more time in yourself? Start tiny. If you're investing 0 minutes in your day right now, where you feel as though, hey, I'm making time for me to invest in me, to be silent with me, then strive for 5. See if you can get 5 minutes in your day that are all about you, because you've been able to free yourself up in a way mentally to no longer be responsible for that one item you've found a way to remove from your day. So just some insight there at the end. It's something specific that I took from, that I strive to do better within my world, that I know I can do better in my world. I'd like to believe that you can potentially do the same. Thanks again to Glenn for joining us, and thanking you, as always, the listener, for taking the time to tune in. If you're listening to us on Apple, please take the time to leave some form of a rating, 5 stars preferably. I think we are completely worth it. We are striving to get 100 5-star reviews by the end of 2025. We're at about 57, I think, as we are recording this episode. So help me get to 58, 60, and beyond. And also, if you listen to us on YouTube, leave some comments. Leave some comments in the section where you can, just so I know you're not only tuning in, but what you're taking and when you're receiving something in the recording, in the episode that is really striking you in that moment. I love for that direct feedback, and I appreciate anything you can provide. But in the meantime, as always, folks, best of luck with anything and everything you're doing in your world. I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.